Alright, let's do this. Yo! Welcome, and good morning. No, that was shit. Hey! Wake up! Alright, technically this is going to be part 2. I'm going to label it part 2. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about, so we discussed weed sales on a couple of videos ago. Illinois passed their legalization of marijuana. It went really well. They made $3 million in sales the first day on a comment. Thank you. I can't remember the name on that comment, but it was 77,000 transactions approximately across the state, which is big. That's a big number. Obviously, $3 million, that's a lot. It's a fucking lot. Now, so people in many circles pitch marijuana as something that's not as toxic as alcohol, not as addictive as nicotine, or as bad for you as cigarettes. Why not make it legal? It grows in the ground, all that kind of stuff. And so what I've learned through life is never trust people who just talk. You know what I mean? Who just say whatever they think. Even without knowing, they take it, they say it with no backing or anything, right? I try and limit that and limit people's just kind of forced perspective on me and my life with facts, with evidence, with, as much truth and data as I can get my hands on, right? That's what makes me informed. It's what makes me, I like to think, different than just someone who would just go along with the flow because someone told me to go with the flow. That's not my feel. And I want to make sure that you guys have all the stuff that you need to make an informed decision now that many states are popping up with these new laws. So we're going to go from basic to benefits to negative effects and to pros and cons. So we're going to go down the list of stuff, get to the bottom of it, find out where we come out, see where you stand on it. Now, to put it simply, so marijuana uses the endocannabinoid system, okay, which is your two primary receptors in your endocannabinoid system, right? So that's CB1 and CB2. They're highly prevalent in both your central and your peripheral nervous system, which is why weed kind of affects all of that. So the CB1, it influences things like motor coordination, the process of thinking, appetite, short-term memory, pain reception, perception, and brain immunity cells. CB2, it's the whole body. That's present throughout the whole body. So it regulates the function of the cardiovascular system, like the kidneys, the skin, bone tissue, fat tissue, the eyes, lungs, gut, and the pancreas. So weed knocks out everything. It knocks out mentally, physically. Or weed covers everything. It's mental and it's physical. Now, the two ingredients in what makes weed so, weed is the THC, and which is tetrahydrocannabinoid, and CBD, which is cannabinoid oil. Or cannabidiol? Yeah, cannabidiol is what it's called. I was thinking like CBD shops. Anyway, back to the topic. So they bind with the cannabinoid receptors in your brain, okay? And so it attaches to the receptors, and the THC decreases the brain's inhibitory neurotransmitters. Okay, lots of big words, and it enhances the excitation, which when the THC hooks to your receptors, it then creates new pathways that connect in your brain, in different brain structures. It forms different brain pathways, right? So for example, that means that it affects your brain. So how does it affect your brain is the question I had. What links are we getting from this? What's it doing what's it doing in our mind when it makes those different structures, those pathways, right? So some benefits from making new pathways is pain relief. Obviously, everybody knows that, pain relief. So it can be used for treatment on mild chronic pain. It's also, they said, it's hypothesized that under the influence of marijuana, brain cells, they stop producing those inflammatory signaling molecules that manifest as pain. So they actually can, so it actually limits and turns off, to an extent, that pain receptor, which I think is pretty neat. That's pretty cool for me. There's another thing is muscle spasms, right? So the cannabinoid receptors are present in nerve muscle junctions. When stimulated by THC, they alter the nervous impulse and relax your muscles, right? So they relax your muscles. Even in smaller doses, they say that they can alleviate certain neurological symptoms, like things like tremors. Obviously, good examples like Parkinson's disease. There's tons of videos of people who have Parkinson's disease. You put some marijuana, some oil under their tongue, some cannabis oil, and they stop shaking. They can kind of relax. It stops the tremors, you know. So, and also this isn't technically confirmed, but it's heavily hypothesized that cannabis can influence brain cell regeneration via CB1, which is the mental part of your the endocannabinoid system. It's CBD1 of the yeah. So obviously that's good. So for people with like dementia, things like that, on a higher level. Sleep quality. So low doses of THC lower your blood pressure. So when they lower your blood pressure in your brain, and they stimulate that CB1, so which regulates sleep onset. So I mean, you often in the morning it says you're followed by morning drowsiness, but in most chronic users and people who use it a lot, the accumulated effects of marijuana on the brain tend to downregulate receptor expression and stabilize their sleep cycle for people who regularly use it. According to a study that they did for my resource, I'll put it in the description, 84% of people reported it as extremely helpful in helping them go to sleep, and 87% of those people said it was a useful substitute or a better substitute than their prescription medication, which I think is awesome too. And then you have another big one, epilepsy. So the CB1 and the THC stimulates your NMDA and GABA receptors in your brain. So those play a role on the big part of convulsions that we can track down. So the anti-seizure activity of cannabis is proven and qualified just because it destimulates and it diminishes the effect that the NMDA and GABA receptors have on your brain because of these new pathways, right? So another positive there, dementia. The effect of marijuana on the brain can protect already altered brain cells. So, excuse me, we're going to start that over. So, dementia. This antioxidant effect of marijuana can protect brain cells that have already been altered or affected. Say example for like dementia. It can further the oxidative process and degeneration of that disease, that destabilizing disease. In other words, cannabinoid compounds blunt the aggressiveness of dementia. So if you already have dementia and you take it and you continue to take it, you're gonna. From what I'm getting from this research is that it's going to stunt and kind of protect where it's at right there. So there'll be no more degenerative disease from the point that you're at. Is what I'm getting from that. If that's true, then prescribe it to all dementia people. I mean, form those pathways again, because if it's true also on the on brain cell regeneration, then you're doing a 2-for-1. You know, that could be a huge step towards curing maybe something like dementia. But they decline. So, I mean, go dementia. That's good for dementia. Um, Now, obviously, those are really good pros, and like the description says, we're doing pros and cons. So there are short-term, proven short-term, and proven long-term effects of marijuana use. So these are the short-term and negative effects of marijuana, and most of these are going to seem pretty. They're going to seem pretty basic, if we're being honest. They're going to be really basic. So your confusion, it's a big one. It increases blood flow, like we talked about, especially in the frontal region of your brain. So the highly affected brain areas, the frontal, auditory, and the visual cortex, the things that are affected when you get high. So subjectively, these cases, dispersonalization, they dispersonalize from themselves and can get confused and just kind of be in a state of confusion. Obviously, if you're high, you're whoa, that's it. So it just creates a short, different perception of time and sound and color expressions, and kind of a just confused state of where you can be at. That's a short term when you're high. Obviously, your coordination's a bit off. Altered coordination's a big one. THC increases functional connectivity in the sensory motor cortex and reduces in the prefrontal cortex. So marijuana will alter your movement patterns. So the brain to limb connections here, okay, is going to slow down your reflexes and impair your reactive judgment. Obviously, it's pretty simple. Even if you've never done it like me and you watch movies, that's confusion and altered coordination are pretty big ones. Attention deficit, another easy one. You don't really pay attention. Your prefrontal lobe and your frontal lobe are trying to decide between what to do. Like I had one kid in my class one time in my college. He looked at me just totally baked and was like, "Do you think Adam and Eve's apple was like an apple, right?" And I'm just sitting there like, dude, we're taking a fucking test. Shh. Andrew, quiet down. Anyway, so attention deficit's obviously a big one too. It affects your memory and your ability to learn while being high. So marijuana affects the hippocampus of your brain, interfering with the normal processes of learning and memory and forming and challenging yourself to create lasting memories. So people can make the argument that while you're high, you can have memories, but they're not going to be long lasting, creating bonds like memories in the hippocampus part of your brain. These three are some short-term extremes, is what I'm going to call them. So the first one, because I've never heard of this myself, emotional disturbance. So for example, THC affects the oblongata part of the brain that deals with your emotions. That's why you can feel happy or sad or fearful or any of that while on it. So it says most of the data suggests that mood swings come as a result of the induced anxiety from smoking. Now hold on a minute, not anxiety like that kind of anxiety, but the research is talking about social anxiety, like people anxiety, kind of closed off, like I don't want to be around, kind of that social anxiety by yourself, high type. So depending on your THC brain, the impact factor, weed can produce the feelings of either joy or fear. So that's kind of an anxiety thing too. It's a social anxiety. I could be happy and joyful, or I could be fearful and sad, scared, kind of. So that's an emotional disturbance they're kind of describing. There's a euphoria or dysphoria after weed. So cannabinoids will affect the nucleus striatum of the brain, which is where your happy hormones come from, such as dopamine, right? So marijuana causes the euphoria of being happy by manipulating that part of your brain. So obviously when you manipulate dopamine, withdrawal is a big thing from that. So the withdrawal symptoms are the dysphoria and the agitation when your synapses run dry of dopamine. So the highs and the lows of the withdrawal from the dopamine that your brain produces from the cannabinoids mixing and merging with your THC in your brain. So another one here, the last one is the extreme one, is you could have a psychotic episode. It says in low doses, healthy individuals can express mood changes, whereas psychotically predisposed people who already, kind of have this up here, experience fear or severe disturbance from, using weed. So high doses can make it more or less intense for you. It can make, the paranoia, or if you have any kind of hallucinations from it. But again, a lot of that research comes from if you're already predisposed to a psychotic. If it's in your family, if it's your family has it, if there's family history of it, something like that would be more of an effect. So now that we've hit the short term, these are long-term overarching goals of chronic use. So if you use it a lot, over and over and over, these are some long-term negatives that they found. So obviously your memory will decline. We talked about memory. So the heavy users say that their memory and learning are impaired for as little as a week after use consistently. There's also some evidence for memory changes reversing in cases. So you're losing some memory with longer gaps in longer absences in your memory. So that's something. Behavioral change. Prolonged use of cannabis can create an antisocial, like I talked about, behavior and personality where it's just you don't want to talk, you just want to be, you can get irritable, nervous, socially agitated with others. It can cause an actual behavioral change. This one I would just call being lazy, but they call it demotivational syndrome. So frequent marijuana side effects, like this one, it's a low spiritual self feeling, an unknown of yourself, a diminished self-image, right? So no admiration for personal success, you've got nothing. It can persist for years after not using. Most of it, again, comes from the abstinence of using weed and not using weed, probably from the highs and lows of the dopamine and the withdrawal from that. So, and this is demotivational syndrome is a consequence of that dopamine depletion in the brain. If severe, it can lead to depression or worse. So it could affect you and could put you in a state of unknowingness and lack of self-image, not knowing who you are, which is a big thing, to be honest. And obviously you can round off these mental health problems that come along with that as well. You've got, so it says long-term use. We're still in the long-term category, but mental health problems do come from this. Obviously you can do the anxiety we talked about, which is the social anxiety, the self-image issues, depression. You can be depressed after the lows of after the euphoria wears off. Psychosis, potentially, where the brain cell disgust can subsequently inhibit some parts of the brain that lead to manic behaviors, often associated like paranoia, delusions, things like that. And this one's still a low percentage, but addiction has been reported. This is about 9%, which is a really low number, of marijuana users become addicted. But like we talked about, when you develop, if you're a heavy user, you develop a tolerance. When you develop a tolerance, you need to be more high to get the feeling of being high. So you take more, which then increases the dopamine levels. And then when the dopamine levels go up, they crash back down. So anytime you do that to get high, and then you come crashing back down, and then, you got to come out of it sometime. And then that's what puts you in that social anxiety, the self-image issues, the depression. So after a while, the addiction, I wouldn't look at it as the addiction becomes more of a dependence. So in order to feel who you're going to be, who you think you are, you need this drug, this marijuana to be dependent on. So, obviously, to conclude, from my perspective, I think it's a personal choice. You should be able to make this choice for yourself. For example, if you have mental problems, whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's, something like that, maybe you have really bad tremors, then yeah, I would definitely go ahead recommend that, because usually you're older, you have your wife, your kids are all grown up, that kind of thing. So that's where I'd say yes. So the other stuff, any of these mental health problems, anxiety, depression, any mental illness that can pop up from it, psychosis, any permanent damage to memory, that stuff, I think you should be able to be taken upon yourself. So if you are young and 23 and you're like, oh man, it's legal. To me, I feel like it could be, like we talked about before, it could be another big alcohol, another big tobacco. It could just be big marijuana. It's just something that we're getting pitched for money, but it's actually there just to hook us in. Not necessarily in the realm of addiction, but anything that messes with your happy emotions, your dopamine levels. You're walking into dangerous ground where you don't necessarily know what you're walking into. And I think that's the dangerous part that no one wants to talk about. No one wants to talk about any of the negatives, any of the downside to being high, They want to be able to do it without having it be illegal, which I get because there's lots of positives, but again, you got to weigh the cons as well. Lots of negatives. So anyway, that's what we got. That's my decision. That's my thought process. That's my end-all, be-all on this topic. I have a feeling it's going to be popping up a lot more due to more states every year. Probably going to keep making it legal, especially if there's money involved. So keep a lookout. We'll keep going. We'll keep rolling. Keep the tapes rolling. All right. Bye, guys.